The following episode recounts the details of a real homicide investigation. All information presented is taken from court records, law enforcement files, and direct investigative experience. The names of the victims and individuals involved are used with the utmost respect, and no part of this story is intended to exploit or sensationalize their suffering. As a retired homicide investigator, I believe these stories matter, to honor the victims, to understand the truth, and to bring closure to the families left behind. Some content may be disturbing to listeners. Discretion is strongly advised. I'm Detective Sergeant First Class Harry Gavel. I worked in the murder capital of the nation, Camden County, New Jersey. Our officers were based in Camden City. I worked for the Camden County Prosecutor's Office as a homicide investigator. I was there in that capacity during my last 11 years of my 28-year police tenure as a police officer. This story I call The Fatal Favor. It's a sad story. It's a brutal murder. It's a heartbreaking tale of what happened to a 16-year-old high school girl living in Topeka, Kansas, with her mother and father, Irene and Marvin Gardner. They ran a flooring company in Kansas for 57 years. It finally closed in 2016. It was a spring day in Topeka, Kansas, April the 25th, 1993. Birds sang, the air was warm with the promise of summer, and life felt easy. But for 16-year-old Amanda Gardner, the day would become her last. Amanda, who her friends fondly referred to as Mandy, was a friendly, happy-go-lucky kid. She loved to make everyone around her feel special and happy. After 30 years of the incarceration of the trio that caused the end of her life, all three of the killers involved were denied parole. At the parole board hearing, several of Amanda's friends had written letters. A couple of them spoke. One of them was her friend Tennille Kress. Tennille mentioned Amanda's name no less than 16 times in her letter to the parole board, one time for each year that she lived. Her best friend, Michelle Perez, quoted, "Gosh, I wish she was still here." It was said that Amanda was the niece of the then governor of Topeka, Kansas. I was not able to confirm that, but all of her friends still remembered her after 30 years since her demise. They had either showed up in person or issued a letter to the parole board demanding that these three brutal killers remained exactly where they were, behind bars, for the rest of their lives. Amanda was a very pretty brunette teenager. She was a student at Highland Park High School. It was said that her smile could light up the world. She wasn't the top student in class, but she was determined to do better. She worked at the McDonald's on Southwest Wanamaker Road. She held her own cell phone and took pride in her 1990 red Ford Probe with its upgraded stereo. Her friends just adored her smile and her company. Amanda had another friend. As a matter of fact, this friend was a co-worker and worked at the same McDonald's with Amanda. She was 20-year-old Donice Johnson, a black female who was considered to be a very good friend of Amanda. Unbeknownst to Amanda, Donice and her brother, Joseph Johnson, age 19, and her boyfriend, Jerry High, age 17, and her younger brother, Christopher Johnson, age 16, all had conspired a deadly plan. That plan was to ask Amanda for a favor to give them a ride to the bus terminal in Topeka, Kansas, for the purpose of them returning to Camden City, New Jersey to visit friends and family. The Johnsons were from there at one point in their life, but had moved out to Topeka, Kansas. The younger brother of Donice Johnson, Christopher Johnson, age 16, did not actually participate in the aggravated kidnapping, carjacking, and murder of Amanda Gardner or the cross-country crime spree. He was involved in a conspiracy to plan it. So the plan was put in place that very afternoon to commit an aggravated kidnapping, murder, and then a cross-country crime spree to Camden, New Jersey, the hometown of Donice Johnson. Donice had approached Amanda at her work and asked her to provide the ride to the bus terminal after her shift. Amanda unsuspectingly agreed. She had no idea this simple gesture would mark the final moments of her very young life. After leaving work, Amanda got into her car with Donice in the front seat and Joe and Jerry in the back seat. A blunt was passed around. Music was playing loudly on her high-end stereo system, and the day seemed ordinary. But once near the Johnson home, the mood darkened. Joe Johnson looped a purse strap around Amanda's neck, yanked her from the driver's seat violently. Her life began a violent, terrifying end. Amanda fought. She regained consciousness twice, struggling desperately. But Joe Johnson III, strong and relentless, finished what he had begun. Her body was dumped behind Call Area Technical High School in tall weeds, hidden from sight, but not from justice. And then, chillingly, the now killers callously began playing a game of basketball on the school grounds. Casually laughing, enjoying shooting some hoops after they just had murdered a 16-year-old girl and dumped her lifeless body behind the high school. They stole Amanda's car and set off on their cross-country crime spree. Penniless, high, and desperate, the trio stopped along the way to burglarize homes after casing them, trying to determine which homes would be best targeted to break in where no one would be home. They did exactly that. They broke into several homes along several towns during their cross-country drive through several states in their desperate attempt to fund their evil ride to the murder capital of the nation. Destination, North Camden, where, unbeknownst to them, their crime spree would come to a screeching halt, and so would their freedom as they knew it for a very, very long time. They gave absolutely no thought that the traces of the crime spree they left behind, pawn tickets, stolen goods, the reports of the various thefts along the way during their drive, every mile of their reckless drive would later serve as evidence against them. It was only a matter of time. By the time they reached North Camden, New Jersey, their luck was not only running thin, they got involved in a hit-and-run accident and drew attention of the Camden City Police Department. As soon as the accident occurred, all three fled the stolen vehicle, leaving the doors hanging wide open in the breeze as they took off through the streets of North Camden seeking refuge. It's unknown to us if they had an idea where to go, but more than likely they did, since they were living there at some point and had spent considerable time in Camden City. It was assumed that they had friends and relatives there, but we didn't even know who they were yet. The vehicle, bearing Kansas City license plates, was registered to a missing person, Amanda Gardner, and almost simultaneously, a 13-year-old boy had discovered Amanda's lifeless body in Topeka, Kansas, ditched in the tall weeds behind the school. Police authorities in Kansas and New Jersey coordinated. Camden County Prosecutor's Office Homicide Division detectives, myself, and Detective Jerome Boyd were called in. The investigation began. First, the car was scoured over by the Camden County Prosecutor's Office crime scene investigative techs. They searched the car for evidence. They found it to be loitered and cluttered with trash from various containers from which they ate. Evidence of McDonald's leftover French fries. You can picture the scene inside of that car. It resembled a rolling trash can, to tell you the truth. Inside and on the vehicle, the technicians searched for latent fingerprints that may have been left by the culprits of the stolen car. Of course, the car was loaded with fingerprint evidence. Those latent fingerprints were dusted, lifted, and taken to the Camden County Prosecutor's Office, where they were examined in-house and records were located for the individuals involved, and the case was in full motion forward. Do not pass go, do not stop. There's a missing person. It is unknown at this time what these circumstances were, but we had to follow the evidence that we had, and that's exactly what we did. Once we got a handle on some of the identities of the people we thought responsible for the carjack or car theft at that time, we began to map out every location where they could possibly be hiding. Friends' homes, family addresses, known hangouts. Surveillance teams were deployed in strategic areas. Finally, intelligence led us to an apartment in the Fairview section of Camden. The suspects were holed up there, still under the influence, still desperate, and still convinced in their minds that they could escape. The moment Amanda's body was discovered in Topeka, Kansas, the media exploded. Every local and national outlet covered the story. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Camden, the killers were completely unaware of just how close the net was closing in, unless they had seen the reports all over being projected by the media that the body of their victim had been found deceased, strangled to death behind Call Technical High School in those tall weeds that they left only a few days ago. Did they know? Did they know the search was on for them specifically? We don't know, but we had to treat this case as if they did in fact know. Once we zeroed in on a location that we believed that they were possibly holed up in, we surrounded the building. The three fugitives were inside, and it was unknown if they had obtained or had any type of weapons with them. But again, we had to assume that they did. You always prepare for the worst, you always assume the worst, and you plan for the best outcome that you could possibly bring forth. It's not an easy balancing act. You'd have to be there to really understand the intricacies that are involved in planning a takedown. And believe me, there is planning. Being lead detective and my partner, Jerome Boyd, are the homicide detectives that are going to be doing the actual investigation. Once these suspects were apprehended, we would be the ones who would be involved in their interviews and interrogations and to determine their culpability pertaining to the body found in Topeka, Kansas. We didn't know that they were in fact responsible for that death at this point. And our first concern and obligation at this time was to be successful in apprehending them. All three suspects were apprehended without incident. They were taken at gunpoint by the tactical team as Detective Boyd and myself stood by in the secondary line of defense of this operation. All three suspects were searched upon their apprehension. No weapons were located. All three were handcuffed and seated in Camden City police cruisers, where they took their ride to the Camden City Detective Bureau. Unbeknownst to them, it would be one of the first rides they would be receiving on their way to the penitentiary. Once at the Detective Bureau, all three suspects had to be evaluated. This is done by checking their backgrounds, contacting friends and family that they know if you have that information, looking at their arrest records if they have one, and determining who might be the weakest link or the person to approach first to be interviewed concerning some of these very burning questions that we had. Were these the suspects involved in the carjacking, kidnapping, and murder of our 16-year-old victim lying somewhere on an autopsy table in Topeka, Kansas? After careful consideration, we decided that the female, Donice Johnson, would be the first person that we would approach. We knew that each suspect would be questioned carefully. While interviewing Donice Johnson, without much difficulty, Donice confessed to the orchestrating, the planning, and provided detailed information concerning the murder and the crime spree. She included in her statement that her brother Joe Johnson was actually the person responsible for looping a purse strap over the neck of Amanda and strangling her to death. They all three helped in carrying and dumping her lifeless body behind the school. Since she indicated that her brother Joe Johnson III was the actual main participant in the homicide, we decided next to be interviewed would be her boyfriend, Jerry High. Jerry High was 17 years old, black male. Not much of a record, but he did have some juvenile contact with the authorities. Joseph Johnson III had a small rap sheet to my recollection, but no murders. Other crimes of theft, drugs, and things of that nature. Jerry High corroborated the murder. He confessed fully. He described the strangulation, the disposal of Amanda's body, and the cross-country flight. The chilling details of playing basketball after the murder made the crime even more horrifying. Not only to us, but later to the news media and to the people who would be involved in prosecuting them. And I know it would be a concern to their defense people. That was yet to be seen. Now it was time for the interview and interrogation of the actual person responsible for Amanda's murder, Joe Johnson III. Joe Johnson was a black male, age 19, as I said, with a small rap sheet. I was loaded for bear. I was going to be the lead interviewer and interrogator. Detective Boyd entered the room with me. He was the Camden City detective assigned, and we were ready. We advised Mr. Johnson of his rights under the Miranda decision, which he waived with no difficulty after reading the Miranda decision rights afforded to him, and waived them, agreeing to speak to us without an attorney present. I began the questioning, and I was intense. I took a seat directly in front of him. I made sure I had eye contact with him. I was watching his every move. My first question was, "Mr. Johnson, is it okay to call you Joe?" He said, "Yes." I said, "You're willing to speak to us, correct?" "Yes." The tape recorder was rolling. I said, "Joe, do you know who I am?" Answer, "Yes." "Who am I?" was my question. "You're from homicide." "That's correct." "And Joe, do you know why you're here?" Answer, "Yes." "Why are you here, Joe?" "Well, I'm here because we killed Amanda. We stole her car and we dumped her body behind the high school. And we played a game of basketball after that. My sister wanted to come to Camden, but she ain't have nothing to do with the murder. She just wanted her friend to lend us a ride to the bus stop. But, we already had planned to take her car because we didn't have no money and drive to Camden. Her boyfriend wanted to go with her. Our younger brother was with us earlier, Christopher, but he didn't do nothing. He's only 16. He didn't come with us. And, we had an accident when we got to Camden, and y'all, caught us and brought us here. I was floored, to say the least. A little taken off guard by the fact that he so readily confessed to the homicide of Amanda Gardner. All three provided tape recorder statements which inculpated them in the carjacking, the aggravated kidnapping, the actual murder, the disposition of Amanda's body, and their cross-country crime spree. where they broke into several properties, residential homes, stole items, pawned those items, some of them, to fund their trip to Camden, New Jersey. The case was airtight. All three were booked in the Camden County Jail. Kansas authorities were notified, and cooperation ensured that justice would follow. The trial in Topeka, Kansas was tense. It was about a year or so after the arrest of these individuals that I was notified by the Topeka, Kansas prosecutor's office, advising me that they would be sending me a subpoena to come to their headquarters office in Topeka, Kansas, and to be prepped by the trial attorney that was going to handle the matter in court. I was advised that Joe Johnson was pleading not guilty in the case, and he was represented by a New York attorney who the Kansas authorities thought was a very sharp and cunning defense attorney from the big city of the Big Apple, New York City, and that they had their challenges cut out for them. They wanted to bring me to Topeka, Kansas a couple of days before the trial to be involved in daily preparations up until the time I had to take the stand and testify in the case. My partner was not subpoenaed. Since I wrote all the reports and I did all the main interviewing and interrogations, I was named in the subpoena, which I had no problem with. I arrived in Topeka, Kansas. I was greeted by members of the Kansas prosecutor's office. I was ushered into one of the offices of the trial attorney, which was handling the case, and preparation began. I could tell and feel that the room was tense. There were 2 or 3 other prosecutors also in this room, where they went over the reports with me and wanted to hear what my testimony would be and practice and preparation for the upcoming trial. The air seemed to be filled with a tense nervousness of the fact that this big city lawyer from New York was going to be the defense attorney which we would face. I, being exposed to many attorneys over my tenure, not only with the Runnymede Police, not only with the Camden County prosecutors, other units that I worked, but from being in the homicide division and facing defense attorneys. The fact that a big city New York attorney was going to be the adversary defending the case didn't really bother me. Yes, I was aware that I had to be careful and precise and truthful in my testimony, but I had no fear of facing this New York City defense attorney. It was just another attorney, in my estimation, and I would handle my situation as I would any other situation, with calm and confidence. That's what I was trained to do. The day came. It was time for me to take the stand. I was sworn in by the transcriptionist. The judge sat in his seat looking at me. I took the stand after swearing that I would tell the truth after the oath was given. The defense attorney waited for a few moments before he said a word. He rose from the defense table with a couple of papers in his hand, walked slowly in front of me, where he stopped directly in front of the witness stand. He was dressed in a black suit with a white shirt and a glaring, flamboyant necktie and color-matching pocket square. He looked like a shark who was smelling blood in the water. No doubt. He set his papers down, folded his arms in front of him, looked up at me, and threw his first question out. Detective Gavel, at the Camden Police Detective Bureau, you obtained a tape recorder statement from my client, Joseph Johnson III. Was that interview video recorded? Answer, no, sir. Defense attorney. He turned slowly, walked back to the defense table. After a numbing silence, he turned his eyes to the judge's perch, but before he sat, he glared at me one more time as looking at the judge at the same time and said, "The defense rests." That was it. Media cameras rolling. The prosecutor sprung up and said, "The state rests, Your Honor." Now I'm thinking, this guy got some kind of trick up his sleeve? Or what? Now we were expecting a formidable defense. We knew our case was airtight. We were expecting a fast verdict from the jury. Usually speaking, generally speaking, if a jury is given a case and they come back fairly quickly or in a short order of time after deliberating over the evidence, it's usually a guilty finding. That night, the Action News for Kansas, Topeka, Kansas, we were there at the prosecutor's office watching the news report, expecting that it would be out on the 6 p.m. news. And the very same reporter that was in the courtroom had front stage in the cameras at the news station, and her statement was, and the attorney from New York City had but one question for the homicide detective of Camden, New Jersey. Period. Now, by all accounts, that defense attorney was considered to be a high-powered New York attorney representing the defendants. But it certainly seemed to me that he didn't delve into the case at all to provide the type of defense that I know defense attorneys are capable of presenting. Now, don't get me wrong, that is also a strategy a lot of times when you don't put on a vigorous defense, especially in a case like we had, which was airtight, complete confessions of guilt of all three. All the Miranda decisions were given. If there were any errors that we made, the Camden County Prosecutor's Office couldn't find any, nor could the Topeka, Kansas authorities find any during the preparation of the case. We were happy. The not guilty was not a worry of ours. It was merely a concern. But if you put it on a scale of 1 to 10, all involved were leaning to a high 9 that we would receive a guilty verdict, and we did. All three defendants were convicted of first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, theft, and conspiracy. Sentences were 30 years before parole eligibility, and the youngest, Christopher Johnson, received 4 years for his involvement in the conspiracy during the planning of this horrible act. Subsequent patrol hearings consistently denied their early releases. Amanda Gardner's life had ended tragically, but justice was served. The case remains a stark reminder of the cruelty humans can inflict and the relentless work of investigators to hold perpetrators accountable. In the memory of Amanda Gardner, this needs to be said. This is not where the case ends. Even after the trials, the story of Amanda Gardner lingered in every mind involved. She had been just 16 years old, a bright, vibrant girl whose life was cut brutally short. She had gone out of kindness giving a ride to a friend. And in return, she met a betrayal so cruel that it chills the bones. The very people she trusted had plotted her murder, stolen her car, and embarked on a crime spree fueled by desperation and recklessness. The most haunting detail, one that no court could erase, was the cold-blooded, almost surreal callousness of the killers. Imagine it. After strangling Amanda, they played basketball. They threw a ball through the hoop, laughed, and carried on as if nothing happened. That image, a leisure game after murder, etched itself in the minds of everyone who followed the case. It was a stark reminder of the depth of their cruelty, the complete absence of consciousness, and the fragility of life when crossed by evil. Justice, however, eventually prevailed. Each perpetrator faced the consequences of their actions. Donice Johnson, Joe Johnson III, and Jerry High received 30-year sentences before parole eligibility. Christopher Johnson, the youngest, was held accountable with a 4-year sentence. Every attempt at early release so far has been denied, a testament to the severity of their crimes and the meticulous work of law enforcement. For Amanda's family, justice was bittersweet. Her parents, Marvin and Irene Gardner, would live to see convictions, though both passed in the following years. Marvin died in 2012 and Irene in 2013, respectively. They could take some solace in knowledge that the killers did face law, but nothing could erase the loss of their daughter. Nothing. The stolen years or the cruel image of the final moments of her life would be etched in their minds, and they would take it to the grave. For those of us who pursue the case, there was a lesson in every detail. That careful, relentless investigation, combined with preparation, patience, and an unwavering commitment to truth, could overcome even the most calculated cruelty. Amanda Gardner's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even can strike in the guise of friendship, but also that justice, though sometimes delayed, can prevail. And in the end, while the killers remain locked away, their fleeting games, their selfish crimes, their calculated cruelty, all were permanently documented, remembered, and condemned. Amanda Gardner's life may have ended much too soon, but her memory and the justice that followed remains a lasting testament to the resolve of those who refuse to let her story go untold. The end. See you next time for another true story from the murder capital of the nation.